Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 38 of the Giant Zone. Of course, you got your two favorite co-hosts. You got Steve the Banker.
Go Yankees.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And you
Had to
got
throw that
yours
out.
truly, Fly Guy Carl. Another great show tonight. 5-1, feeling really good. So we're all in a good mood and we're all starting to really get into this now and drink the Kool-Aid a little bit. So let's keep it going. Tonight we're lucky to be joined by Daniel Griffiths. He writes for the Jaguars, and we'll let him explain that for on his own a little bit. But hey, Daniel, welcome to the show. Thank you for some time tonight.
Oh no, thank you guys for having me. It's I'm you know very excited about the game this weekend. You guys are having a great season so far, so I'm excited for you guys. I'm a bit shocked today that I saw the Jaguars are favored and predict it's 72% win percentage for the Jaguars, which is baffling to me.
Right.
But yeah, I write for Jaguars Wire at USA Today. Also have a podcast covering the Jacksonville Jaguars as a whole. So that's kind of my background in terms of the team. I've had my family's had season tickets since their inaugural season in '95. So I've been a fan of the team as long as they've existed. And I was born in '96, so I was kind of born into it.
Wow. Now, how long have you been writing for the USA Today?
I joined in 2018.
Okay. And you do that full time?
No, I'm a contributing writer. I'm not a not one of their top guys. They just did have a editing change, so they're figuring that out a little bit. But yeah, I've enjoyed my 4 years there now.
Gotcha. I look, that's great. I'm a little jealous actually.
Yeah, I'm still a student at Florida University of Florida, so I've got a couple of jobs aside from sports writing as well as school. But I do what I can.
You're a Gator.
Yes, currently. Yeah,
college. I'm down here. We're down here in South Florida. I have a senior in high school, two daughters, and a lot of friends and family of them at UF or UF alumni. So go Gators.
We're cool. top five in the country. So I'm happy to be there.
Yep.
Nice, good school. So well, and good luck with your education too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So Daniel, we want to kind of go into the game, of course. We want to learn more about the Jaguars, but before we do that, give us some thoughts. What are your feelings about the team so far to this point? And happy, disappointed? I know they've shown some glimpses here. So, what are your thoughts?
So far, it's really been a roller coaster of a year. The first season, or the first game of the season, they kind of came out and kind of played about how I expected to. Trevor Lawrence made some nice plays, but they struggled a little bit. It was nice to see Christian Kirk get involved early. The first three games, he had over 300 yards, so that was really good to see. Right. Defenses had been playing fairly well. Trayvon Walker had that wild interception the first game of the year. Devin Lloyd's played very well, but the last 3 weeks have been kind of concerning. Trevor Lawrence has not played very well. This past week he played all right, but the Eagles and the Texans, it was some pretty rough football. He had 5 turnovers against the Eagles in a monsoon, and you just can't win. Jaguars somehow were in that game despite the 5 turnovers. Right. So the defense as a whole has played pretty well, aside from this past weekend against the Colts. They're the best run defense team in the league, yards per carry wise, which is good to see considering we're playing you guys with Saquon Barkley. The defense, aside from the Colts game, has played pretty well. Offense is a little up and down. I'd like to see them commit to the run game a little more. Etienne and Robinson have been playing fairly well. They've just been throwing the ball a lot. Etienne's getting like 11 yards a touch the last 2 weeks. Right. He's got over 200 yards on about 20 touches. So that's an area I'd like to see them, try to be more explosive. He had a 48-yard run this past weekend. Looks really good. Both of them are coming off serious injuries, so I'm happy to see that. And in general, our O-line's playing pretty well. So it should be a good matchup for Kayvon going against Jawan Taylor and Ken Robinson.
And Etienne's really been coming on. He started slow, if I'm correct, but he seems to be coming. I don't know if it's just he's finally starting to adjust to the speed of the game or what, but he seems lately he's really been coming on more.
Yeah, last 2 weeks is, like I said, he's got over 200 total yards. I'd like to see them get him in the passing game a little more, and I'd like to see them get him more touches, try to manufacture those explosive plays, because it's just not happening in the passing game right now. Trevor Lawrence threw one ball over 15 yards last week. That's just, you're on a team that is as bad as them. You kind of need those splash plays. We're not going to have 12 play drives consistently enough to do that. So I'd like to see them get some more splash plays on offense, especially in the passing game. But yeah, Etienne's been fantastic. He's the guy that they go to when they need a big play, and so far he's been delivering. And James Robinson's been that rock. If you need 4 or 5 yards, he'll go get that for you. So I'm happy with where the run game is. I'd like to see the O-line do a little bit of better blocking, because Etienne and Robinson have been getting stuffed a little bit. But in general, I'm fairly happy with where the Jaguars are at. They're better than I expected them to be. But at least they're not getting blown out like they were last year. So that's a market improvement.
Steve, what do you have?
So I guess it probably makes sense. Let's just stay on the offense for a moment. So you guys have Doug Peterson now as coach. Giants fans know him well. We hate him. He won a Super Bowl with one of our most hated rivals. But I think for me and for a lot of common sense Giants fans, there's much respect there. And I think the Jaguars probably needed that. You could talk more about that, but you want to talk about the Giants needing to change culture. I think the Jaguars needed that as bad as anybody in the league and getting a new coach. And I told people, and Carl saw this when we did our season predictions in our podcast, A, I was worried we were going to lose against the Jaguars going into the season, because B, I said Trevor Lawrence is going to have a phenomenal year, way before Colin Cowherd, way before a lot. We have it on tape. And what would be unusual about that is Trevor Lawrence, this is only his second year. And you never, ever see quarterbacks do that. It's always year 3, they take the big jump. And I was worried about it. Started off the loss, but then you guys had 2 big wins, not just the Colts, but you beat the Chargers. I mean, you killed them.
Handily. Yeah, handily.
So there's a question I have. I'm leading to a question. So I think they've come back down to earth. A lot of that is probably the defense. You could talk about that in a moment. But when I think about your offense, I can't imagine it's just Trevor Lawrence's fault. To me, when I look at your roster, and so here's where I'm going to the question for you. 2 things. One, it looks like you have a running back by committee. When we played the Packers, it was what they call the pony formation. They literally play with 2 running backs at the same time. Robinson is 340 yards, 4.5-yard average, which is actually very good. And then Etienne, like you said, is 301 yards, a 5.6 average, plus he has 146 yards receiving. So he seems to be a dual threat. So first question is, are they ever in the backfield at the same time? What's the scheme of this offense? And then number 2, when I look at your wide receiver core, and we can include our old tight end in there too, is fine. You really only seem to have one really solid number 1 wide receiver with Kirk, and there's not a lot there after that, at least statistically from what I've seen so far. So the questions are, how do you guys play those running backs? And then big picture, what's the scheme of the offense? Is it really running to set up the pass because you only have the one really big play threat at wide receiver? What as Giant fans, what can we expect from your offense in the scheme? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so far, Doug Peterson's kind of been the ideology that, hey, we're going to throw to win, or as he put it, we're going to throw to score points, run to win, which in his mindset is a predominantly passing offense, which is fine in theory. I'm good with that. The problem is I be a bit critical here of Peterson, who's calling the plays in Jacksonville. The Jaguars will have like 6 good runs in like the first, like this past weekend. They opened the game with like 15-yard run, 6-yard run, 12-yard run, and then they just go pass for like a quarter and a half. And it's like, okay, it's a bit.
So it's not balanced.
Not at the right times. This past week they ran an end around on like 3rd and 1 or a jet sweep, and it's like, okay, just we were killing them up front, and then you went outside and kind of took our strength away there a little bit. But the offense, I'd like to see them make it around James Robinson and Etienne while Trevor Lawrence is still trying to figure this out. He's had some really good moments and he's had some pretty bad moments. I'd like to see a little more consistency from him. He's having some problems throwing the ball high. And maybe that's something that you guys, notice in terms of your Giants. Maybe you guys get some interceptions off some high balls this week. They generally aren't on the field the same time. I've seen it a couple of times, but in general, they like to swap them out. This past week we got Jermichael Hasty, who broke off a 61-yard touchdown run. So we'll see how much they get him involved going forward. I wouldn't expect it to be, a large sample size, but he's another guy who's made a couple plays for us. And Christian Kirk's kind of just not getting targets the last 3 weeks, and the coaching staff said that's on them. So we'll see their thought process going forward with him. The first 3 weeks he was fantastic. They were feeding him, and then the last few weeks he's kind of fallen off a little bit, and it's been noticeable for Trevor because he hasn't been playing as well as the first 3 weeks. So hopefully if they can get him involved. Evan Ingram's been fine. He's there. I will say Dan Arnold is not getting nearly the targets that he was at the beginning of the year. So I think that Evan Ingram's definitely solidified himself as our tight end. And I will say, watch out for Agnew. He's due for one or two big plays a game, or one or two possible big plays a game. He's a guy, especially on special teams, to watch out for. Dude's dangerous, fast as hell. So if Trevor can get in a rhythm early and can stay in a rhythm, and the Jaguars focus on the run game, I think that they'll be in a good place. But you guys have a pretty good defense.
So before I kick it back, Carl, to you, just to sort of make sure I'm clear, Daniel, one of the questions I love to ask as a follow-up, and Carl, if I may, is just, so when we think about the Giants, and we talked about this in recent podcasts where we talked to other teams, podcasters and writers like yourself, only because it's at top of mind as Giants fans. We came out of like the prehistoric age the last few years with our offensive schemes, and there was no pre-snap motion, there was no post-snap misdirection, nothing creative, nothing modern when we think of. So when we face the Jaguars, when the Giants face the Jaguars, do you guys do much pre-snap motion? Is there any misdirection? I know you mentioned the jet sweep. What can we expect as fans when we view the offense for the Jaguars? Is it pretty standard old school offense, line up, put a hat on a hat, or what can we expect? I guess that's where I was going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're a lot better than they were last year. Last year they killed Trevor because a lot of for young quarterbacks, it's nice to have that motion because you can figure out, you get little hints as to what the defense is trying to do. And for Urban Meyer, it was, for someone that led college offenses so much and how prevalent motions are and stuff in college, that was anemic to watch last year with how little they helped Trevor in terms of setting up plays. The play calling is fairly creative. They're doing some fun stuff with Etienne and Agnew. I'd like to see Etienne a little more involved in the pass game, like I said, but it's a marked improvement from last year. And they've got, some guys that they're not top shelf guys, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, but they do they do a fairly good job calling plays to get the ball in some of these guys' hands. They're good route runners. They're not super explosive. Christian Kirk's, he's 4'4", but he's not a world beater. But if you're looking for a big play, I think it's going to be Agnew or Etienne that's going to be the big guy to watch there. But the other guys are more so good football players, but nothing spectacular. Christian Kirk's a good football player, but he's not going to be a guy that, he's not Tyreek Hill or Waddle or somebody like that.
So I have two more questions about the offense, and then we could switch it up because I know we're on a little bit of a hard stop here. So also my first question involves Trevor Lawrence, and give us a little snapshot of what's going on with him. All the talent in the world. He's been better this year than last year, and I think a lot of that is coaching and system as well. And I'd almost be willing to throw out last year, given what took place, down there with Urban Meyer and whatnot. But even with James Robinson, But what are you seeing with Trevor Lawrence? Is he making bad decisions? Is he forcing the ball? Does it look like he's forcing it because he feels the need to make plays? So what are you seeing with Trevor Lawrence that still needs to be corrected?
My biggest thing right now is just take the easy stuff. There's a lot of plays. His interception for instance, his interception to Derek Stingley at Houston. He was trying to force a ball into like triple coverage in the back of the end zone against Houston, and the first he could have waddled with a cane for the first down and just get themselves first and goal on the 5 or the 4. And it's like, okay, just take what's in front of you, especially when you're playing. And he's had another problem with the red zones are becoming. We're not doing very well in the red zones when it comes to Trevor Lawrence. He's had a couple turnovers in the red zone, which is killing us because those big drives for us, those are key for us because we're scoring 23 points a game right now, which is last year we scored like 13.
Right.
So we're always in games. I expect the Giants to win, and we'll get to that later. I expect the Giants to win. I do expect the Jaguars to be in the game. This
back on the show, by the way, Daniel, just so you know.
Come again?
You just got an invitation to come back on the show whenever you want.
Oh, I'm a realist here, but I do expect the Jaguars to be in the game. The defense is good enough to keep us in the game. The offense is, doing well enough to keep us in games as well. But just a couple of small things from Trevor, taking what's in front of you. Try not to overthrow some guys as much as he is, especially early on in games. Get into a rhythm and against the Colts and the Chargers when things were in front of him, he was fantastic. But also this past week he did lead a touchdown drive the last couple minutes of the game, which is fantastic because previously he threw 2 interceptions on the other 2 potential game-winning drives. So I'm happy to see that for him, and hopefully he can continue to improve. This last week he was 20 of 22, good, but he did still miss a couple of easy things right in front of him.
And the only part of the offense we haven't touched yet is the offensive line. What's going on with your offensive line? Are you pleased with it? Does it need work? Where are the weaknesses?
The tackles are playing pretty well. God love PFF. I don't, everyone's got an opinion on PFF. PFF has the Jaguars with the 4th best pass blocking in the league. Jawan Taylor and Cam Robinson are doing their jobs. The Jaguars did have an injury to Ben Bartch, who's now out for the year. He was our left guard. Tyler Shatley is now playing, as well as Cole Van Laan, who's stepping in a little bit for some snaps. But in general, the interior is a little weaker than the tackles. Brandon Scherf has been good. He's not been an all-pro guard this year. But you also have a rookie at center. So I think the place to attack would be on the interior. But, you guys have a monster at edge rusher. So I expect him to get in the backfield a little bit.
We actually got 2 monsters right in the middle too. So, and they're both playing well, and one's coming back off of injury. So hopefully they continue to be monsters there. Steve, is there anything else you have on offense, or you want to go over to defense?
I guess the only thing I'll ask about offense before we pivot over, and it's a good segue to defense, I suppose, is it wasn't so long ago that we had the draft. Mm-hmm. And both of our teams were up there, right? And the Giants had multiple picks, and everyone was like, okay, what are the Jaguars going to do? What are the Jaguars? And taking Trayvon Walker, listen, especially after that first game, I'm sure Jaguar fans were like, okay, these guys did know what they were doing. But he's got 1 sack on the year. Now, the Giants' top edge pick, Kayvon, only has 1 sack, but he was also hurt for a couple games. And, but how do you guys feel about the fact that you had multiple defensive players you picked, some excellent prospects, excellent players, and we'll get into defense. But I think it was curious that the Jaguars didn't go heavy on offense either, that they kind of doubled down. So when we talk about offense, before we pivot over, big picture, taking a step back, now that you've educated us on the players and what you have, what are the fans feeling about the fact that you didn't really add anything to the receiving core? You didn't add any dynamic players to that offense for this potentially generational quarterback that you've invested in.
Yeah, I think it's I think you have to take notice of who our GM is, Trent Baalke. He has not hit on a receiver ever. It's been bad. So, we traded up and took Devin Lloyd at 27, who I think so far has been the best rookie in the league. Dude's been fantastic. He did have a rough week this past week. He gave up like 125 yards and a touchdown, but previous to the other 5 games, dude's been all over the field. He is set to break Patrick Willis's rookie tackling record. Dude's on pace to break it by 30.
And just so I'm clear, we're going to talk about defense. I don't mean to be rude and interrupt, just because. So when we talk about him, the kid out of Utah, he has no sacks, but I saw he has at least 1 interception. So that's how they use him on defense.
Yeah, he's been flying all over the field. So it would have been nice to have a George Pickens. Sure, I'm not sure how involved a rookie would be in this offense. They seem to like Zay Jones. I'd like to see. I think it's obviously always better to have better receivers, but I think right now, Trevor has the tools to be successful in this Jaguars offense. I just think he has to take what's in front of him. I'm not sure how much a rookie would have helped there, but on the defense, those 2 guys are making plays all over the field. So I have no qualms right now about who we picked.
So if I'm correct, the big offensive addition in the offseason was Christian Kirk.
Mm-hmm. They are paying Zay Jones almost $10 million a year as well.
So would you say that Kirk has been a disappointment, or are they not using him properly?
It almost seems like they've forgotten about him the last 3 weeks. The first 3 weeks, everyone was like, "Oh, this dude's the best receiver we've had since Allen Robinson," and in the last 3 weeks, it's like we're struggling to find him on the field. He had a few drops, as is Zay Jones, but in general. If they can get him rolling this week and continue, to remember that they paid this dude like $19 million a season, they'll be in good shape. Just feed the good players you have. And
I think they're paying Evan Ingram. It was only maybe like a 1-year contract, but I think
7.5. 11, was it 11? Okay. Yeah. So he's not been featured too much, but we're also not throwing for a ton of yards. We threw for 162 last week. So, it's hard to get yards and you're only throwing for 160 yards a game.
Has Ingram been catching everything, or does he have, because his trademark here was drops in big places and big spots. So how's he been doing down there?
That hasn't been too much of a problem. I mean, we lead the league in drops, but he's not one of the main culprits there. We have 14 right now.
He's got 200 yards, so he's had some production.
Yeah. He's not. He's doing fairly well. Zay Jones and Christian Kirk had a few. Christian Kirk had a bad Eagles game. That was awful. So he got a little more action this past week, but I'm hoping to see better from him going forward.
I actually think for him, I think Evan Ingram landed in a very good spot for him.
Yeah.
With Doug Peterson in that offense, I think that's a nice place for him.
So let's flip the script here. Let's go defense. So I want to start with the guy that you mentioned, Devin Lloyd. I love him. I think he got the best linebacker in the draft next to Darian Beavers for us, who's hurt right now. It's my guy, but Steve knows my love relationship with that guy. But so Devin, now I think he hurt his hand Sunday. Was that correct? Didn't he get an injury and came out early?
Yeah, he should be good to go though.
I was just going to say, look, I'm asking for a fantasy perspective, but is he expected to play Sunday?
Yes.
Sorry, Steve. So
he should be good to go.
So let's go defense. So I know Steve likes to get a little more granular than I do. So I'm just going to ask, from a 1,000-foot overview, give me your thoughts on your defense. I mean, look, I'm impressed. Rushing yards per game, you're number 3. You're giving up less than 100 yards per game, which I think is fabulous. And points per game, you're 9th. You're only giving up 19. So defense has definitely been showing up. What are you seeing that you like, or what are your concerns?
Defensive line's been playing fairly well. We haven't had Foley Fotukasi for a couple games now. He's been hurt. He was a key run defender for us, so that's kind of hurt us the last couple weeks. Luckily, Indy didn't have Jonathan Taylor. That might have gotten a little ugly there. Yeah. But Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker have been playing pretty well. Josh Allen especially. I saw that the Jaguars have the highest pass rush win rate in the NFL currently, so that's good to see. Tyson Campbell's a monster. He was the number 1 corner last week. He's number 7 overall for PFF. He's been doing really well. He allowed 8 yards last week on a handful of targets. Devin Lloyd's all over the field. Foye Oluokun's playing pretty well. The weaknesses, Rayshon Jenkins at safety, as well as Shaq Griffin had a abysmal week last week. He gave up 130 yards and a touchdown.
And so Jenkins has been physical. He just can't cover. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So he's kind of been a liability in coverage. He's all right, in the box, but this is becoming increasingly a passing league. Luckily, we're playing you guys, which is more of a run first offense. But hopefully he plays better against you guys. Cisco's been pretty good, especially for a guy who's essentially a rookie, because Urban Meyer forgot who he was last year, quite literally. He didn't know who he was on the roster, so we're getting there. But Devon Hamilton's another guy, defensive tackle, has been playing pretty well.
Steve?
It's going to be a fascinating game for me to watch our offense against your defense, and I'll tell you why. You guys run a traditional 3-4. Your front three, I mean, it's almost like we're looking at 1990 all over again. They don't really, from what I see statistically at least, and tell me if I'm wrong, you guys don't rely on your front three to apply pressure. It's just completely clog up the running lanes and let Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen do their thing. I see Josh Allen has 3 sacks. So like you said, let those guys like be ferocious around the edge. And then you get Devin Lloyd out there covering the middle ground. Very different than the Giants, very different than some of the other teams. So my first question is, do they run like a zone scheme in that secondary, in that second and third tier, the linebackers, and then the secondary, where they're covering zone sections of the field, or is it more man-to-man? Because they're doing a great job against the run, but what's that schematically, what is our offense going to see? Are there going to be pockets where they could, because other than the Colts and the Chargers, who clearly had a really tough time against you guys. The Colts scored no points in that second game. The Chargers only scored 10, and that's the Chargers. Right. Granted, the Texans only scored 6, but it's the Texans. They're anemic. But the Texans scored 13, but the Eagles had 29 points. The Colts, unfortunately, I'm sure it's a bitter taste right now, but they scored 34 even with that. So where are teams scoring against you guys? You run a 3-4, you clog up the running lanes. You got the 2 guys firing around the edge. Are you playing a zone or is it man-to-man?
They play a lot of zone. It's a lot of short passing. We don't get beat too often. It's Shaq Griffin has given up some bigger plays, but a lot of it is safety and linebackers. Like I mentioned, Devin Lloyd had a pretty bad week this past week, and that could be evidence of, hey, the Jaguars defense finally gave up. They bent a little this past week. And you mentioned the 29 points against the Eagles, but it's also important to keep in mind that Trevor Lawrence had 5 turnovers. How bad you gave up 29 points, but at the same time they had like 12 drives. So that's another thing to keep in mind there. I think that the Jaguars run defense is really good. I think that you guys play favorably against our defense in terms of Josh Allen and what he can do. Josh Allen is not exactly a Dyson quarterback. No offense to you guys. So I think that, if he can take some of the shorter stuff, there's plays to be made there, especially, if you guys get Saquon involved in the passing game, that may be something to watch as well. It's going to be fun to see Devin Lloyd try and tackle him. If I was the Giants, I'd be attacking Shaq Griffin and Rayshon Jenkins. I think that those are the glaring weaknesses. Tyson Campbell's solidified himself as one of the great corners in the league. And I would try to attack the other side, see if you can get a matchup you like on the other side there.
Just one follow-up question, Carl. I apologize. So when we talk about your 2 outside linebackers, from what you've seen as a writer and even just as a fan, defensively, are your two outside linebackers good at setting the edge? So when I think about our offense, are we going to be able to, should I expect as a Giant fan that maybe they're going to try to use misdirection and get them to chase and run because they're young and they're fast in pursuit? Or are they really disciplined at setting the edge? Because you got your three defensive tackles, but then can we run to the outside, or is that where Saquon might get his chances? Or no, Stephen, they're disciplined. They're excellent at setting the edge, and they don't get fooled. What would we expect as fans to see out of your two outside linebackers?
I will say they're pretty good run defenders, especially Trayvon. He's been learning a little bit still as a pass rusher. He's still figuring out as a run defender. Dude's been really good. Josh Allen's been really good. Trayvon Walker's actually made some plays, and aside from that interception, he's also made a couple of really nice plays at coverage. So that's something to watch out for. It's pretty hilarious watching that dude in coverage. I still think he's Miles Jack, just because I'm so used to seeing Miles Jack in 44, and then I look and I was like, God, he's so big. So they ask those guys to do a lot. Most of the time, it's hey, pin your ears back, but they ask them to do linebacker. They're purely not edge rushers. They're linebackers. I'd like to see them blitz a little more than what they do. Especially with Devin Lloyd, who's a fairly good blitzer. He was pretty good at Utah. He led I believe he led the team in sacks. So I'd like to see them get him a little more involved. But as a run team, them setting the edge has been something that's allowed them to be as good as a run defending team as they have been.
Okay. I'm surprised by Devin Lloyd's speed. He's much faster. He's quicker, and he's quick off the ball, and he's much more athletic than I thought he was. And I actually liked him coming out of college. But he hasn't really missed a beat at all.
No, and I was concerned because he didn't play in preseason or training camp really at all because of injury. So the first week he had a couple things there, but he's played as well as I thought he would. Honestly, I thought the dude was going to be great from the get-go. I kind of was thinking that between him and Walker, he would be the better player immediately. Luckily for us, they've both been pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of Balky, but they've both, all of his picks and free agency signings, I can't complain too much about. This team's a lot better than they have been recently. So I'm happy with the additions. Foye has played pretty well. I miss Jack. I love the guy, but they've decided to move on from him. That the defense is playing very well, and it's nice to see, especially considering all the capital that they spent on it.
Are you happy with the direction this team is going in, despite the record right now?
Yes. I think that I don't know if you've seen our schedule. It's rough coming up. So we've got you guys, and then we've got a stretch of, they're not going to be exactly in order, but Denver, the Raiders, Kansas City, Denver's in London, Kansas City. So those are that's a tough stretch there. Especially with Denver and Kansas City, who I think are probably better teams than us right now. We kind of botched it, losing to the Texans and the Colts in back-to-back weeks. I thought those were two games that we should have won. And going in 2 weeks ago, I would have said that, hey, we got a pretty good chance against the Giants. But after watching the last 2 weeks, I don't know that that's the case anymore.
After what I've seen out of Denver recently, I think you beat Denver. They're a mess.
They're bad. Russell Wilson's playing bad.
And he's got no offensive line in front of him either.
So they still have they've got players. They're just struggling right now to kind of piece it together. And that's obviously a coaching issue. No one's happy with Hackett right now.
Right. Coaching matters.
You guys got the guy, one of the guys that I wanted. I wanted Dabble. And then if it wasn't Dabble, I don't know that I would have hired him, but I really wanted to at least interview Mike McDaniel, who I think is a literal genius down there in Miami.
Right. Well, you can't have Dabble, so sorry.
No, but just charisma. Dude's got so much charisma.
Hey, but real quick, just because I know we're crunched for time. I'm interrupting again. I don't mean to. Talk about K'Lavon Chaisson. He was a high draft pick.
Who?
Chaisson. Clavon Chason?
Don't know him. I'm joking.
Yeah. It's okay. We have a guy on our roster that we say the same thing about on offense, so it's okay.
Does it start with a Kenny?
He may have gone to UF just like you.
Yeah. Oh, Kadarius, not Kenny. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's two of them.
Yeah, but it's like Voldemort, the name that shall not be spoken. But I mean, he was heralded out of, if I remember correctly, LSU. He was on the national championship team. I think he's on IR now. What happened to that guy? Just out of curiosity. I'm sure a lot of Giant fans listening may be like, yeah, they got this guy Chase on down there, but
I had a lot of hope for Chase Young, especially when they drafted him. He was so young, physical athletes, all of 6'5", 250. He's had 2 sacks, and I don't remember the first one. I know the second one was like a gimme. So it's been not fun. It's not even like he's close. We're light years away. A lot of fans are kind of past him. He's been a non-factor in games. He gets some snaps, or he has been getting some snaps. He got some snaps last year, but it's not even a lack of, sometimes pass rusher plays really well and they just don't get the numbers. And it's not that. It's just he's not getting the job done. And I think it's telling that the Jaguars decided to draft Trayvon Walker at 1.
Yeah, interesting. And he's on IR, so I know we won't see him. But
he's done for 4 to 6 weeks now. They expect him back, but I'm not sure how much. The Arden Key's been playing well enough as a third guy. So
let's wrap this up here. What give us a prediction for Sunday?
I'll go 27-23 Giants.
Wow. I say wow because that's a lot of points for us. Steve, what do you think?
Oh, you're kicking it to me?
I am.
Oh man. I'll tell you what. I think this is going to be the first game we score 30 points.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. I don't think it's because our offense is going to have such an easy time against Jacksonville. I think we'll make some key plays, and from what you're telling me, Daniel, and in the secondary and et cetera. But I expect Wink's defense to continue this trend of getting turnovers. I was worried about Jacksonville going into the season. I still feel strongly about Trevor Lawrence. I think he's just going to be like unbelievable. You guys are set at quarterback. That's my personal opinion. But I think Wink is going to throw at him some stuff that he hasn't even. He will have nightmares afterwards. He will say, "Wait a minute," and I mean, leading up to this game, he's going to say, "What the hell was that?" I mean, we as fans just saw some stuff in this last game that no one in this league has ever seen, like a 3-player stack up the middle. We're like, when did he come up with this? Is he doing drugs? We love it. It's great. So I think there'll be some turnovers, especially from what you're telling me. And anyway, I'm thinking 31-21, Carl.
Wow. All right. So, wow.
I've got a couple things for you, if I may go.
Go right ahead.
I will say we are the worst tackling team in the NFL statistically.
Okay.
That's important. We're last. And I will say we have the best punter in the NFL. It isn't close. Logan Cook is averaging about 60 yards a punt. Wow. Dude is kicking it from end zone to end zone. So that's something, that's something that's a lot more important than a lot of people will think, especially if your offense can't move the football, because it's a lot different that the opposing team is starting on their 25 instead of, their 45. That's especially when you're playing the Giants. No offense to you guys, but Daniel Jones isn't exactly Justin Herbert or Pat Mahomes, where 20 yards is no big deal.
34-21 Giants.
Oh, we're 3 high-scoring games.
I was going to go low, but then I heard they're a poor tackling team, and I see Saquon putting up big numbers.
Yeah, it's gonna be the Devin Lloyd Saquon Barkley matchup is going to be a fun one.
Can't wait to see it. Steve, I'm sorry.
We are one of the better teams in the NFL at scoring now in the red zone. We usually get our 7 now. And that's purely coaching. Mike Kafka and Dable bringing the Kansas City and Buffalo hybrid, ideas together. So it's, as Giants fans, we're still waiting to wake up from this. We're still in disbelief, because you have to understand, this has been a decade. This hasn't just been like one or two. I mean, this is, we still, as Giants fans, I think, don't even know how to, this can't be real, what we're seeing.
We don't know how to appreciate it.
We're trying to put our,
if we get some turnovers in a short field, like we saw against Baltimore and against Green, that's why I was thinking we might score over 30 points. We could have scored over 30 this past weekend against Baltimore if Saquon had run it in, but he did the smart thing. I don't know if you saw the game or the highlights, but he dropped right before the end zone to kind of let us run at the clock. Smart coaching. Obviously, we would have scored over 30 points, would have been nice. But I think that would, to me, so just so you know, it's not because I think our offense is going to march up and down the field. I think we're going to have some short fields against you guys if we do get some turnovers.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up the tackling and the punting, which I think are both, important for a little context there. To be fair, it's not Devin Lloyd that is causing the issues at tackling. He's been pretty good. It's just some other guys that need to be tackling better. But I think it's going to be a fun matchup. It should be two teams that are within the same realm of competitive play. I think that the Jaguars are probably a little better than their record, and I think the Giants are probably a little worse than their record.
That's true in the NFL.
Look at the NFC. Hey, the NFC is rough right now.
I'm going to renege that invitation in a minute, there, Daniel.
Hey, I came on here and the first words out of my mouth is you guys are going to beat us. we're talking about putting our kicker who got Urban Meyer fired in our pride of the Jaguars. So you're talking about decade out, man. We're beyond. We're hardly a football franchise.
Daniel, before we let each other go, talk to us about that home field advantage. And we have so much love. We do have a mutual connection as fans. So much love for Tom Coughlin, who did so much good and still does for the Jacksonville community. So ironically, for two franchises that you would think have nothing in common, we do have this connection, this amazing human being who brought so much success to both of our franchises. What is it like? I couldn't make it. I was hoping to get up there. Carl, I don't know that you can make it because we're here in Florida. For those listening, what's that home crowd like, and what's the tailgating like? What's it like at a Jacksonville game? Just out of curiosity.
For a team that's been as bad as they have been for nearly 2 decades now, it's almost and it's a whole Florida thing, really. But the entire state of Florida understands that Jacksonville is a very passionate city. The Duval. I can go anywhere in the state of Florida, chant Duval, and the whole crowd is going to be, Duval. If for people who don't know, in New York, it's the county. The city of Jacksonville is about as big as the state of Rhode Island. It's the biggest city in America. And Duval County, the only city in Duval County is Jacksonville. So they're basically the same thing. They're synonymous. But the fans are really incredible. Very passionate fans. We got the Bold City Brigade. We travel fairly well for a small market team. And Tom Coughlin meant a lot for this franchise. He's kind of the one that was, birthed us into success and birthed this franchise. Started off, had some really good formative years of the franchise's history. Unfortunately, I was too young to remember, or not born at all. I wish that he wouldn't have come back to be our vice president of football. I think it kind of soured some previous thoughts of him. It's kind of like never meet your heroes type thing. It's you never want to come back and kind of sour what you already made. But he's still widely loved in Jacksonville. His name's on the side of the stadium, and he's a guy that is always going to be remembered as the guy that kind of brought the Jacksonville Jaguars to the city.
That's great.
Awesome. And maybe that's a good note to end it on, Carl.
Yeah, it truly is. So Daniel, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate this. Great insight. We appreciate you being open about it. And, hopefully down the road, we can do this again next time they play each other. And, good luck the rest of the way and the rest of the season. And again, good luck with your education.
Oh, no. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you guys having on. And before I go, Duval.
Hey, Carl, maybe Daniel, just remind our listeners where they could find you.
Yes.
Oh, yes. On Twitter, I'm at Dan D. Griffiths, and I write for the Jaguars Wire over at USA Today.
Great. Daniel, again, thank you so much for the time tonight. We really appreciate it. And everybody, again, please keep listening, subscribing, and the 5-star ratings. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week. We'll do another show next week. Looking forward to it. Have a great weekend, and go Giants. Enjoy the game.
Hopefully it's an enjoyable Sunday.
Yes, it
Take
is.
care, guys.